I knew they didn't like me the moment I walked into that house. No one said anything. No one had to. It was in the way their eyes moved over me. Slow, careful, measuring. Like they were checking the quality of something they had already decided was not enough. I was the bride. And yet, I felt like an outsider standing in someone else's living room. My future mother-in-law smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. My future sister-in-law didn't smile at all. And my future father-in-law barely looked up from his phone. I told myself to stay calm. I had faced worse rooms than this. They just didn't know it yet. I grew up learning how to stay quiet. Not because I was weak, but because silence taught me more than noise ever could. My parents raised me to listen first, to observe, to understand people before responding to them. They also raised me to never explain myself to anyone who hadn't earned the truth. That lesson would save me later. But that night, sitting on their expensive sofa, I let them believe exactly what they wanted. That I was simple. That I was lucky. That I should be grateful their son had chosen me. My fiancé squeezed my hand gently. He sensed the tension, even if he didn't fully understand it. He came from comfort, from safety, from a family where doors were always open and voices were always loud. He had never needed to read a room to survive. I had. Dinner was served on heavy plates that probably cost more than my monthly rent at the time. The conversation stayed polite, but sharp. "So," my future sister-in-law asked, tilting her head slightly, "what exactly do you do?" The way she said it made the question feel smaller than it was. "I work in consulting," I replied calmly. "Oh," she said, unimpressed, "like office work." I nodded. My future mother-in-law smiled. "That's nice," she said. "Our family is very business-focused." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I took a sip of water and stayed quiet. They talked about money openly, about investments, about connections, about deals. Not once did they ask my opinion. Not once did they wonder if I understood. And I let them believe I didn't. Because sometimes, underestimation is a gift. After dinner, when I excused myself to use the restroom, I passed by the study. The door was slightly open. Inside, my future father-in-law was on a call. I didn't mean to listen, but some words stop you where you stand. "The merger has to go through next quarter," he said. "Yes, the overseas partners are the key." I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Not fear. Recognition. I already knew the deal he was talking about. Very well. That night, on the drive home, my fiancé apologized. "They can be a bit traditional," he said carefully. I smiled. "It's okay," I replied. And I meant it. Because they weren't my problem. They were about to become my lesson. Over the next few weeks, the comments continued. Subtle, carefully disguised as concern. "Are you sure she'll fit in with our circle? She seems quiet. Does she really understand how our family operates?" My fiancé defended me when he heard it. But he didn't hear everything. They never said the worst things in front of him. Only when I was alone with them. One afternoon, my future mother-in-law invited me for tea. Just the two of us. Her house was immaculate, perfectly arranged. She sat across from me and folded her hands. "I want to be honest with you," she said. I nodded. "We worry about appearances," she continued. "Our family name is important." I waited. "You come from a simpler background," she said gently. "And sometimes that creates challenges." There it was. I looked at her and smiled politely. "I understand," I said. She seemed relieved. What she didn't understand was that I had already navigated rooms far more powerful than hers. Rooms where one wrong word could cost billions. A few days later, I attended a family gathering. More relatives. More eyes. Someone laughed when I said where I lived. Someone else joked about how down-to-earth I was. I let it all happen. Because timing matters. And mine was perfect. The truth was, I hadn't told my fiancé everything about my work. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't need my identity to be the foundation of our relationship. I wanted him to love me for who I was when nothing else was visible. And he did. That was enough. What his family didn't know was this: the deal they were celebrating, the one they were waiting on, the one they believed would secure their legacy. I was already involved in it, from the other side. And when the moment came, they wouldn't recognize me until it was far too late. I consult on international mergers, I said calmly. There was a pause. Just a small one. Then someone laughed. Oh, one of them said, smiling. That sounds impressive. But I could hear the doubt. I continued eating quietly. I didn't explain further. I had learned that explanations are wasted on people who already made up their minds. The conversation moved on. They discussed the deal again. The structure. The risks. The concerns. One man from the other company frowned. There's a compliance issue, he said. We're not convinced it's covered. My fiancé's uncle waved his hand dismissively. It's fine, he said. We've handled worse. I stayed silent until the man asked, has anyone here worked on cross-border regulations in Southeast Asia? No one answered. I slowly placed my fork down. I have, I said softly. The table went quiet. I explained. Slowly. Clearly. I didn't use big words. I didn't show off. I just told the truth. I saw their expressions change. Interest replaced dismissal. Questions followed. Real ones this time. I answered every one. By the end of the night, the tone had shifted completely. The man from the other company looked at me and said, this deal wouldn't survive without those adjustments. He turned to my fiancé's family. Why didn't you tell us she was leading this? No one spoke. On the drive home, my fiancé was silent. Then he said, I didn't know. I smiled gently. That's okay, I said. Most people don't. The next morning, the deal moved forward. With my conditions. With my framework. With my name quietly placed where it belonged. No announcement. No celebration. Just recognition. The wedding still happened. But something had changed. They spoke to me differently now. Carefully. Respectfully. But I noticed something. They respected what I could do. Not who I was. And that was enough for me to understand. The weeks after the engagement were not peaceful. They were polite on the surface, but I could feel the distance growing thicker every day. At family gatherings, I was introduced without pride. This is her, my future mother-in-law would say. No name. No warmth. They spoke about business freely in front of me, as if I were invisible. Big numbers. Big plans. Big dreams. I listened quietly. Not because I didn't understand, but because they didn't think I could. One evening, the groom's uncle laughed and said, after the wedding, our family deal will finally go through. Everyone smiled. I did not, because I knew exactly which deal he was talking about. And I knew something they didn't. That deal depended on one final approval. Mine. My fiancé noticed my silence that night. You're very quiet these days, he said gently. I'm just observing, I replied. He smiled. He always trusted me. That was the difference between him and the rest of his family. The mocking didn't stop. At a dinner, someone joked. At least she's simple. She won't interfere in business matters. I smiled politely. Inside, I felt calm. Because powerful people don't announce themselves. They wait. A few days later, the family gathered for an important meeting. The deal was big. $950 million. They were nervous. Excited. Lawyers joined on video calls. Documents were prepared. I was asked to bring tea. I did. Then I sat quietly in the corner. At one point, the main investor's representative joined the call. He said, "We are waiting for final confirmation from our senior partner." The room went silent. My future father-in-law frowned. "We were told everything was approved," he said. The representative paused. "Yes," he replied, "but only after she signs." Everyone looked confused. "Who?" my mother-in-law asked. The representative checked his file. He read my name. Slowly, clearly, the room turned toward me. I stood up calmly. I adjusted my shawl. I walked toward the table. "I believe," I said softly, "you've been discussing my company." Silence. Pure silence. My fiancé looked at me, shocked. "You," he whispered. I nodded. "I didn't hide who I was," I said. "You never asked." That was the moment everything changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. The days after that dinner felt different. Not lighter. Just clearer. I stopped trying to prove myself. I no longer dressed to impress them. I no longer explained where I came from. I no longer tried to earn their approval. Because something inside me had settled. I knew who I was. The deal they were waiting for became the center of everything. $950 million. That number was spoken in whispers and excitement. It floated through the house like a prayer. The groom's father paced the living room daily. The mother spoke to relatives proudly. They talked about new cars, new homes, new status. They spoke as if the deal already belonged to them. No one noticed how quiet I had become. One evening, the groom's father spoke to me directly for the first time in days. "You should learn how business works," he said casually. "You never know, you might need it someday." I smiled politely. "I already know," I replied softly. He laughed. Not kindly. "You," he said, "you wouldn't understand numbers like these." I nodded. I didn't correct him. Power doesn't rush to speak. The meeting day arrived. Important guests were coming. Executives. Lawyers. Investors. The house buzzed with nervous energy. The groom's family dressed carefully. Voices were tense. Smiles were practiced. I wore a simple outfit. Nothing expensive. Nothing loud. Just clean. Calm. Confident. As we entered the boardroom, people stood up. Not for them. For me. The room fell silent. One man smiled and said, "We've been waiting for you." The groom's father froze. The groom's mother blinked repeatedly, confused. Someone asked, "Shall we begin now that the final authority is here?" Final authority. I walked to the head of the table and sat down. Slowly. Quietly. Every eye followed me. "I'm here on behalf of the investment group," I said calmly. "And I'm also the person who makes the final decision." The groom's father's face drained of color. The groom looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. "No," his mother whispered. This must be a mistake." I met her eyes gently. "It isn't," I said. I explained everything. My background. My role. My silence. Not with pride. Not with anger. With facts. The room listened. No one interrupted. Because truth has weight. When I finished, the lead investor asked one final question. "Do you still wish to proceed with the deal?" I paused. Not for drama. For honesty. I looked at the groom's family. At the faces that had mocked me. Measured me. Dismissed me. Then I said, I believe in respect before contracts. Silence. I am withdrawing, I continued calmly. Effective immediately. The sound that followed was not shouting. It was something worse. Shock. As we walked out, no one spoke to me. Not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't know how. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That night, I sat alone. Not broken. Not proud. Just peaceful. I realized something important. They didn't lose the deal because I wanted revenge. They lost it because they never saw the human in front of them. I did not respond to their laughter. I did not correct their assumptions. I simply smiled. I had learned long ago that people who judge quickly often listen poorly. And I was not there to explain myself. The dinner continued, but the mood had changed. They spoke freely now, assuming I was harmless. My future mother-in-law leaned toward her sister and whispered something, not quietly enough. She seems simple, she said. But at least she's obedient. I heard it clearly. So did my husband. He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable but said nothing. That silence stayed with me. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was my assistant. Her voice was calm but urgent. The merger meeting has been moved to tomorrow, she said. They want final approval before signing. I looked at the calendar. Tomorrow was the day of the engagement ceremony. I smiled to myself. Send them the confirmation, I replied. I'll be there. She paused. Should I inform them who you are? She asked. No, I said gently. Let them discover it themselves. That evening, the groom's family gathered again. They were excited. The deal meant everything to them. It was the largest opportunity they had ever seen. They spoke proudly about how their future would change. New cars. New houses. New respect. No one asked what I thought. No one asked what I did. I sat quietly, listening. Sometimes power is loud, but sometimes it waits. The next day, the meeting room was full. Executives, lawyers, advisors. I walked in wearing the same calm expression I always did. The room went quiet. One of the senior partners stood up immediately. Good morning, Ms. Rao, he said respectfully. We've been waiting for you. My future father-in-law froze. He turned slowly and looked at me. His face drained of color. You, he whispered. I nodded politely. Yes, I said. I'm the one approving the deal. No anger. No pride. Just truth. The silence was heavy. The same people who mocked my background now avoided my eyes. The same voices that laughed yesterday could barely speak today. I took my seat at the head of the table. Shall we begin? I asked calmly. No one argued. No one smiled. I did not cancel the deal. I did not raise my voice. I did not embarrass them. I simply changed the terms. Respectfully. Legally. Firmly. By the time the meeting ended, they understood something important. I had not crushed them. I had spared them. That evening, the groom's family sat across from me again. This time, their posture was different. Their words were careful. My mother-in-law spoke softly. We didn't know, she said. I met her eyes. You didn't ask, I replied. By the time the truth was fully revealed, I was already tired. Not physically. Emotionally. I had spent so many years learning how to stay quiet that even when people finally listened, my voice felt unused. The wedding was over. The laughter had faded. The mocking smiles had disappeared. And suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. The same people who had ignored me. The same people who had looked past me. The same people who had whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. Now they stood in front of me carefully, respectfully, almost afraid. Not because I had raised my voice, but because they finally understood who I was. I had never planned to reveal the truth. I never walked into that family hopping to impress anyone. I never wore expensive clothes or spoke about business. I never corrected them when they assumed I was simple, because I believed character matters more than status. But that night, when the deal collapsed, when the room fell silent, when faces turned pale, I saw something clearly. They hadn't underestimated my wealth. They had underestimated my dignity. My son stood beside me, quiet. He didn't defend me earlier. He didn't stop the jokes. But now, his eyes were filled with something else. Regret. "I should have said something," he whispered. I looked at him and smiled gently. "Some lessons are learned only when silence becomes heavy," I said. The groom's family tried to apologize. Their words came out carefully chosen, their tone respectful. But apologies that arrive after humiliation never sound the same. "I don't hold anger," I told them. "But I don't forget how people behave when they think they are superior." They nodded. They understood. The deal they had mocked me over was never about money. It was about trust. And trust, once broken, doesn't come back easily. I walked away quietly. No drama. No celebration. Just peace. Weeks later, life returned to normal. Or at least to a new normal. My phone rang more often. Invitations came easily now. But I declined most of them. Because respect given only after discovery is not respect I crave. One evening, my son came to visit. He sat across from me and said, "I didn't know how strong you were." I smiled. "You didn't need to," I replied. "You just needed to believe in me." I realized something important through all of this. Power doesn't need to announce itself. Truth doesn't need decoration. And dignity doesn't depend on how others see you. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is carrying the strongest story. And sometimes, the people who laugh the loudest are hiding the weakest values. Now, when I look at myself in the mirror, I don't see a woman who was mocked. I see a woman who stayed graceful when tested. And that, I've learned, is a victory no deal can ever buy. Taught by take care ipper family.